Yeah, so basically the plan is to just kind of compare Mario Galaxy and Mario Odyssey. I kind of have a feeling this may be the intro, guys. We'll see. I'm on Just Restart. That's Rob from Rule 2 Review. His channel will be linked in the description below.
Hello. Yes.
But the basic plan, right, and maybe this will become a series, maybe this won't be a series, is we're just going to compare two games that have some semblance of a similarity. And this one is fairly obvious. We're comparing Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario Odyssey. And I guess the inciting incident for this one is that there were just kind of like a few Twitter interactions that I saw Rob talk about Mario Galaxy, like, I don't know, like a week or so. No, you talk about Mario Odyssey. And
Mario Odyssey.
Right, yeah. You had said that it was like, you agreed with someone, I think, that it was a little overrated. And I didn't even respond to it. I just kind of like saw it in passing. I didn't really think much on it, right? But then like you posted something else and I just like jokingly responded like, hey man, look, I know you don't like Mario Odyssey, but you know, it's cool. Yeah. Don't worry about it. I think you were actually going to post a video. I think you were teasing your Metroid Other M video.
It was. Yeah. So what happened is you saw the conversation with someone else.
Yeah.
And I basically agreed in comparing to another game, you know, that I also think is a really good game. That's a PlayStation game. And I made an offhanded comment that, yeah, you know, I think Mario Odyssey is actually overrated. And then after 2 more days, I had a lot of people talking about that and cracking jokes about, you know, oh, what a horrible take on Mario Odyssey or whatever. Nothing too toxic or bad. Mostly people just having fun. But I definitely was like, okay, everyone calm down. Like, I don't think overrated is the same as bad. So I made a follow-up tweet specifically about Odyssey and said, let me clear it up. I think it's still very good, but I also think it's overrated, blah, blah, blah. And then I made another tweet that was, like you said, teasing the Metroid Other M video I was going to be releasing and how it was going to get me canceled as a joke. And then you commented your thing you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
About we can still be friends.
Yeah, and it was purely in jest, right? Like, you know,
it was funny.
You're totally entitled to your opinion to not like Super Mario Odyssey as much as I do, right? But I actually even kind of agreed once I thought about it a little bit. Full disclaimer, I love Super Mario Odyssey. I'm trying to figure out how much I love Super Mario Odyssey. I think that's kind of part of this discussion. But basically, I kind of realized, well, you know what? Mario Odyssey is, at least from my perspective, it is literally overrated. And when I say that, what I mean is, if you take a look at Mario Odyssey on Metacritic, it's actually rated higher than Breath of the Wild. And I will never agree that Breath of the Wild is a lesser game than Mario Odyssey. I think it's the other way around. I think Mario Odyssey is an incredible game. I think it's the #2 game of 2017, which is arguably the best year in Nintendo history. Arguably. I think you'll win most of those arguments. So it's a really good game. But Breath of the Wild, in my opinion, is arguably one of the best Zelda games ever. And at least for this current age, this current time, it's one of the most revolutionary games there is. Maybe you could even make a case it might be the most revolutionary game from Nintendo we've seen since, I don't know, Wii Sports maybe, or even more so.
I mean, the most maybe impactful. You could change, you know, if you change revolutionary to impactful, for sure it's that.
Right. But the ultimate point is that Breath of the Wild is like it's like the biggest, most important game for Nintendo in a long time, and Mario Odyssey is under that. So I kind of agree with you. It's a little overrated because Metacritic actually has it higher. And then, you know, started thinking, when Mario Galaxy came out, it was an incredible game. I still think it's an incredible game. I love to go back to Mario Galaxy. And I sort of started thinking, well, which one do I actually prefer? Do I prefer Mario Odyssey or do I prefer Mario Galaxy? Which brings me kind of like to the topic of this discussion, kind of comparing the two. We don't necessarily even have to come to a conclusion. Maybe we will. I might side more with Mario Odyssey. You may side more with Mario Galaxy. I feel like you do. I mean, tell me what you think. Like, are you more on the side of Mario Galaxy in terms of preferring that game, or do you prefer Mario Odyssey?
So I do prefer Galaxy. I have a very firm and long-held stance on Mario Galaxy. And this has nothing to do with my actual feelings on Odyssey. We'll obviously talk about it, but for me, you know, and the preface for anyone who doesn't already maybe know who I am from my own channel, I'm an old man, okay? So I'm 41 years old. I've been playing Mario since Mario was basically invented when I was a very, very small little kid. And so I feel confident when I say that Mario Galaxy is my personal favorite Mario game that's ever been made. So that's my stance on that. No matter how amazing I think Odyssey is, or how overrated I might also find it to be, which I know we'll talk about, for sure, I mean, if I'm going to come down on any side of a Mario conversation, it's until the game is surpassed in my eyes, Mario Galaxy will just always be my favorite Mario game, even over Galaxy 2, which is a different discussion.
Yeah, maybe that'll be
that's,
another
that's
one.
kind of where I fall on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole different video.
Right.
Sure,
and it's interesting, right? Because there's so many angles we can kind of go at this from. So like, I think going back to Mario Odyssey, I haven't fully decided where I personally rank Mario Odyssey, because I think part of it has to do with time. But we are almost 5 years removed from its release, about 4.5. So there has been some time. And when I think about that, how often have I felt like revisiting the game? I have revisited a few different times, and whenever I do, I have a really good time. Like, Mario Odyssey, when I think about it, I think is the most polished in terms of your movement in the world. And I think that makes it really special. I think it's really fun to just sort of run around and do nothing. Like, that's one of the great things about Mario Odyssey, because it's like a playground. You can just mess around and interact with so many little things. And I think that makes it really special, and it can go a long ways, because there's been a lot of work done in Mario Odyssey to kind of go above and beyond of what perhaps even the designers thought you could do with like jump distances and things of that nature, which I think, you know, kind of add more to how special it is. It's kind of like Breath of the Wild in that way, right? Which is kind of another interesting discussion, just kind of thinking about how Nintendo took Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, and perhaps you could even add in Metroid Dread there, and you just sort of look at how polished the character movement is and how much you can sort of do and interact with the environment. It's on another level. It's just sort of fun to play with these particular characters and interact with their respective worlds. So on that end, I think Mario Odyssey is absolutely the best of any Mario game, and I think it's pretty objective. But I think from when you look at Mario Galaxy, though, there are other things that you can easily argue go in its direction. For example, perhaps the musical score, or simply level design, or just overall direction of the game, or perhaps, you know, just the overall presentation. Like, there's a lot of other things that I think you could easily argue in Mario Galaxy's end, and even to the point of gameplay, right? Like, while I'm saying I feel like the movement is the most polished it's ever been in Mario Odyssey, that doesn't mean the gameplay isn't necessarily 100% objectively better, because you might just prefer a lot more of the gravity mechanics and things of that nature in Galaxy. But if I were just sort of like state my initial point for Mario Odyssey, though, is that I feel from a movement perspective and an interaction with the environment sort of perspective, it is a lot better. And a lot of that is simply having to do with the game being, well, more modern.
Yeah. Are you kind of wanting my take?
Absolutely,
or feedback?
yeah.
Or
I mean, go at it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, great points, and I even, in most ways, I definitely agree with your points. I think one of the first things I think of, and when I compare the two games, is it just comes down to, first and foremost, which gameplay hook maybe works for you the best. Mm-hmm. The obvious gameplay hook in Mario Odyssey is Cappy. And not only just the function of throwing Cappy on something and getting to control that thing, which is a really cool, brilliant idea, but also just how it adds to like the moveset and the control options and abilities and the navigation and the platforming of the game. And then with Galaxy, the obvious gameplay hook is the gravity and the planet hopping and all those different things. And I definitely see them both as good and serviceable to their respective games in different ways. But for me, for sure, and maybe part of it's nostalgia, but I also think part of it is the creativity. I really like the gravity thing a lot more than I like Cappy. I just think that I remember something I used to say when Galaxy was pretty new in the first year or two. So we're going back 07 or 08. I used to say that Mario Galaxy is an idea factory. That whole game, every single level could have its own entire Mario game based around it, because the creativity is literally bursting out of the seams of that game. With Odyssey, I do think it's the same kind of template, And there is a ton of creativity, and the Cappy mechanic is certainly very cool in that game, and I ultimately do like the Cappy mechanic. But I think that there are also elements of it that, to me, maybe just didn't speak to me the same way. That galaxy and the gravity and just the floating around. And you also mentioned the score, by the way, and I think you're dead on with that. The score for Galaxy is still, like, I think top 5 all time for any video game. It's so good. And Odyssey's music is still, it's good. I mean, it's Mario music, so it is good. But I also think, you know, when you talk about the controls of the games, I would agree with you that when it comes to just controlling Mario in his most basic functions and his most basic running around the world and hops and jumps and triple jumps and wall jumps and all that, I mean, because of the modernness, like you said, I agree. Mario controls the best in Mario. He controls better in Odyssey than basic Mario controls in Galaxy. But I'm someone who, and I think that this is one of the things that led me to realize after I had beaten Mario Odyssey and sat on it for a while and tried to revisit it a few times, one of the things I started to realize, I think there was 2 things I started to realize that sort of made me think, okay, Odyssey is certainly a really, really good game and I love it, but it is not as good as I think people say. And one of those is, I actually think some of the controls around Cappy are a little bit awkward. Whether you're doing it with the Joy-Cons, which is how I played my first playthrough, or if you use an analog sticks and a Pro Controller, which is how I've done all my follow-up attempts to play the game, it's like the ideas are there and like you can make almost anything work, but it doesn't really hit home for me. So I feel like when I think of the gameplay of Odyssey, I have it segmented into regular Mario and Cappy controls. And I think that regular Mario is the best it's ever been. Cappy controls are fine, but they're not great. And so when I compare that to Galaxy, I just find it consistent across the board. So there's that. And then the other thing is, and I've struggled to identify this, and so this will be a good tee off to kind of hear how you, I guess, feel about this. The other thing I noticed in revisiting Mario Odyssey since beating it the first time is pretty much every time I go back to that game, and I would say once or twice a year, I'm like, man, I just want to play Mario. Turn on some Odyssey. I'm excited, thinking I'm going to have, 5 or 6 days of just enjoying some random Mario time. There's something about it after beating it. Again, my first playthrough from beginning to that Bowser battle was incredible. I actually thought it was one of the best Mario games. It probably would have been in my top 3 or 4. It was so good for me at that time. But when I revisit it and I go back and try to get more moons, because I've never collected them all, I kind of realize I just get bored. There's something about the overall world, and I don't know. I've never truly been able to quantify it. I think finding moons becomes way less interesting after you beat Bowser the first time. And I know that there's another final version of the boss to beat if you collect all the moons. And admittedly, I haven't done that. I have like 630 moons or something in that game, and I've beaten the first main Bowser battle, which was awesome. I loved it so much. But every time I've gone back, between finding moons and navigating the kingdoms and going through like the dark, I think it's the dark side of the Moon Kingdom that has all the boss rush stuff. Yeah, and I'm like, man, I mean, it's Mario, so it's good, but I just get really bored. Every kingdom I go to visit to say, okay, let me try to find some of these moons I haven't found in this one or that one. As soon as I start running around after 10 minutes, I'm like, I don't know. And again, you have to kind of forgive me a little bit because I've never truly been able to quantify it in my brain. I just get a feeling of boredom. I was riveted from beginning to that first Bowser battle. I was riveted, just loved it. I beat that, I go back every time since, and the game doesn't hook me after I beat Bowser that first time. So that's and Galaxy, last point, Galaxy always hooks me. Every time I revisit it, I think the Switch HD remaster is so incredible and clean and smooth. It blew my mind back on the Wii when it was brand new because it was such a good showcase for that new controller at the time. I've never gone back to Galaxy 1 or 2 and had that feeling of boredom. But Odyssey, as really good as it is, doesn't keep the hooks in me. So that's it's a long spiel. I know I kind of gave you a lot there, but I think that's what I've kind of settled on to get me to that overrated sort of feeling about Odyssey.
So I feel like this is good though, because I feel like my sort of long spiel and your sort of long spiel are sort of like almost like our opening statements, right? And I do find it interesting how you bring up how it seems like it's a little bit harder to revisit Mario Odyssey than it is to revisit Mario Galaxy. And truth be told, this is also something I've thought about as well. So I don't think you're completely bonkers for thinking that, because I've also considered it. Now, I haven't fully decided how I feel on that, because whenever I turn on Mario Odyssey, I don't want to stop. So while that may be the case, I also haven't started from complete scratch and gone all the way to the end again either. And I have done that for Mario Galaxy, but Mario Galaxy has also been out for a far longer amount of time. I've also
15 years.
Yeah, right. It initially came out in 2007.
2007.
So a long time ago, and back then I had a lot more time on my hands, and I also didn't have as much disposable income. So I had less game options and more time. So I was more likely to give Galaxy more of a shot. Not to mention, Galaxy is designed in a way where you want to replay it because of you unlock Luigi, spoiler, and then you want to kind of go through it again to get the 242 stars, right? So there is that. And, I will tell you, I do think you should go back to Mario Odyssey. And this is just something I personally do with all my Mario games. I always go for 100%. It's one of the few games where I feel like it's truly worth it, because going to 100% of the Mario games, it just means you're getting to see more levels. And usually those final levels are very challenging, but also ultra satisfying. So I definitely think you should go for like the 100% in Mario Odyssey, because there are some real special levels after that Bowser's fight. Like, there's still some really good stuff. But I also do feel like that Bowser fight was very impactful. I think the music had a big part to do with that. It was quite a set piece, right? It was beautiful.
I agree. Oh, it's so... I'm not trying to cut you off, but I just have to agree. The music element and like the speed and the running element to that battle was a huge component.
I teared up a little. I had both goosebumps, and I had some welled up tears at the same time. Like, it was a very powerful moment. Yeah. Absolutely.
Same. It was really great. I think it's my favorite Bowser battle probably ever, and I've played them all. Well, except for, I guess, the last one of Odyssey, assuming that's the final battle is another Bowser fight. Yeah, which I think it is. So yeah, it's of all the ones I've played, which is most of them, it's my favorite Bowser battle.
So, it's interesting you say that, right? Like, while I feel like it's such a powerful, impactful moment, in some ways you could say, well, there you go, but it's obviously the best. But, when I think about from just like a boss fights sort of like point of view, and I think that's actually a really important talking point when it comes to comparing these Mario games, because boss fights are a big deal. I do think the Mario Galaxy has the edge overall in terms of boss fights, because, well, one, and maybe it's just because I'm a huge stickler for like huge, giant bosses, but Mario Galaxy has more of those. And I kind of like the designs overall for the Mario Galaxy bosses than I do for the Mario Odyssey bosses. And they kind of feel a little bit more epic. So I guess I prefer the designs of them. And I do think that the Bowser fight is also pretty darn cool for Mario Galaxy. Like, it's no slouch. Now, it doesn't have... It's maybe like that final fight isn't as much of an emotional moment, but it's still like a pretty cool, epic fight, And I guess the point I'm trying to make with this overall is that while I think Mario Odyssey may have a stronger finale, I think Mario Galaxy, and when I say finale, I mean like that ultimate boss fight, but there's still like the stuff afterwards. I think overall Mario Galaxy still has better boss fights. And also, while I think the music in the final fight for fighting Bowser in Mario Odyssey is spectacular, and I think it definitely, that moment has an edge over Mario Galaxy, the music overall, I do have to agree, is better in Mario Galaxy. Like, it's had more of a lasting impact for me. Now, it's not that the music in Odyssey is bad, but it's also not the kind of music I like to listen to outside of the game as much. And I don't know if that should make it worse, because that's just, well, it is what it is. It's for the game, but the music in Mario Galaxy is just really pleasing. Well, some of these are... part of the issue is that there could be memories trickling over from Mario Galaxy 2, so there might be a little bit of a blurring these together a little bit, right? But I know, for example, like Gusty Wind Galaxy, like, oh my god, love Gusty Wind Galaxy and the musical score for that one. Like, that one always kind of like really hits me hard.
Yeah, I think that they just achieved this amazing, spacey, ethereal, orchestrated sort of composition for the Galaxy music, which I think, to be fair, probably has a lot to do with the setting of Galaxy. And so they wrote music, I think, and because they chose that orchestrated sound that is just so powerful, more so than how it comes across in something like Odyssey. It just works so well for that game. And when you're floating or you're hanging out in space and you're floating around and you're grabbing stars to shoot yourself around a planet or a whatever, it just brings you into the world more. Now, to Odyssey's credit, though, if we talk about the world, this is one of the things I love about Odyssey, and I think is actually a strong sign of the future direction, and something I hope they do, which is obviously more of the open world kind of approach, right? And so that's the difference. I go back and forth in my head when I compare the two games from this perspective, because Galaxy does the more traditional thing where you revisit each level in each world over and over again with a specific target in mind, right? You're going for this shine, you're going for this star, you're going for this whatever the item is in that world, and Galaxy does that. And Odyssey, instead of doing that, and this is like both better and not better at the same time for me, it's just different. You just go to a kingdom. It's just a big world, it's just a big map, and there's the thing you're searching for in this game is moons instead of shines or stars or whatever. And so just find the moons wherever you happen to find them. Maybe you have to race someone, maybe it's underneath a rock, whatever you do. You find them, they're just like 40 of them in every single area you go in. And I'm of two minds of this. I think that I prefer Odyssey's open world attempt a lot more than Galaxy's, pick a mission and just do this one mission and you're just on a straight line to your end goal with each level you pick.
I really love that you said open world attempt. I'll just want to point that out, but continue on with your thought process.
Okay, we'll put a pin in it. I'll remind you of that point as I exit here, so you can kind of build off that. But I like the open world attempt of Galaxy more than I like the pick a mission and go in a straight line of Galaxy. I'm hoping I'm not crossing my games out now. I'm really like Galaxy and Odyssey. You can kind of do that if you're not thinking straight. So, but I prefer that. But what I don't prefer, for some reason, is the way the open world design of the kingdoms in Odyssey just has moons like haphazardly sprinkled all around. Maybe I shouldn't say haphazardly. I know people will say like, oh, they're very purposefully put somewhere. And it's true, they are. But there's something less exciting and fun and rewarding and gratifying, just for me. People can disagree. I'm just saying for my own tastes. Something that feels different and less impactful when I just stumble across a moon than when I do pick my mission and I survive all the way to the target at the end of a Galaxy level, right? And the way every time you go back to revisit, by the way, depending on the star you're trying to get in Galaxy, that same level will still be different, or you might take a different path through it. But the open world kingdoms of Odyssey, there's a few I don't like, but most of them I love. And you can't deny how fun it is to exist in a big open world. I mean, they're not huge, but you exist in like an open world map of a Mario game, and you just run around doing whatever you want, So that's kind of how I go back and forth. I still slightly side with Galaxy, but I love the open world attempt with Odyssey. And that was the thing you wanted to put a pin in, was the open world attempt thing.
So it's interesting, right? Because while I find myself wanting to defend Mario Odyssey over Galaxy, and I think the reason is because I also appreciate the attempt in Mario Odyssey more than what I think they did with Mario Galaxy. So what I'm getting at here is that I think the future of Mario, I mean, granted, there can still be linear elements in future 3D Mario games, but I think the path to the ultimate Mario game, there's no such thing as perfection, right? We're always gonna find things that can be better or worse. They're just simply different. But I think the direction they need to go in is the direction Mario Odyssey is headed in, right? Or, for example, Bowser's Fury in 3D World, right? Another version of open world Mario. I think that's the direction they need to go. And I just love having these huge worlds to explore. Like that is something I appreciate. Something I loved about Mario Sunshine, something I loved about Mario 64, and I love that it came back in Mario Odyssey. And I think in a lot of ways it did a great job. But you also sort of alluded to it. It's like they did a great job, but there are some things about it that you love, but there are other things that you think could maybe be a little different, right? So like with the moons, while I enjoyed the moons and there was a lot to find, and I know they did it in part to give more reasons to sort of explore the world, right? Because it gives you more to do in these larger worlds.
True.
I think
that's true.
In one way it helps the game, but another way it does hurt it too in comparison to Mario Galaxy. Because when you think about it, when I think about it at least, I think the structure of Mario Galaxy makes it more replayable for me than Mario Odyssey. And I think a lot of it has to do with the structure of playing the moon, of placing the moons throughout the different maps. In contrast to Mario Galaxy, it's just like you jump into a world and here are a series of stars. And you know, we've seen that before in both Sunshine 64, and they weren't necessarily super linear with the worlds. Like you can do different stuff in them. So I think that in just kind of thinking about what they can do in the future, I think more of a fusion of some of the mechanics in Galaxy alongside of Odyssey, like there is a better balance is basically what I'm trying to get at here, like that could satisfy sort of both desires. I think it can be done. Like maybe, for example, there aren't as many stars or moons. Like there's a smaller amount, but the ones you get are for more substantial actions as opposed to just breaking a random glowing box or hitting a certain piece of land. It's like you actually have to accomplish a serious task that takes some time and effort, but they substitute all those other little things you could find in the environment with another type of thing that you can collect, right? And I know they had like the purple coins.
They tried with the coins, like the currency.
But I think something else, like maybe still have those coins, but also have something else that perhaps leads to your progression of the game. Like it's like a double progression, right? Like for example, in Odyssey, you need the moons to sort of fuel your ship or power it up so it can fly further. Maybe they have that in whatever the sequel is, so you can progress. But also to progress each individual world, there's still sort of like those main objectives you have to do. And when you jump into them, you still see those as tasks you can do, which would be similar to Mario Galaxy or previous Mario games, which I think might help a little bit with sort of revisiting these games, because you won't necessarily have to collect every single moon in random parts, and it'll feel a bit more purposeful when you come back. But you know, this isn't about talking about what would be the best Mario game or where this should go in the future necessarily, right? But you know, of course, when we talk about that, I feel like it's sort of something that naturally does come up. But it's just sort of more like comparing them. I kind of agree with you that Mario Galaxy does feel a little bit easier to revisit because of the way it's structured, I think. But there's still a lot of amazing gameplay in Mario Odyssey. Like Mario Odyssey does have a lot of those A to B points as well hidden within its worlds, which are really cool. They're really fun. And so you're able to get some of that, but still enjoy these open worlds, which I love. So I think there's something special there. But again, it is hard to kind of go back and then go through all the moons again. So in a way, so I guess you would say, I would agree with you that Mario Galaxy is a little bit more replayable. But at the same time, you know, I do feel like the initial experience of Mario Odyssey, purely from like a gameplay point of view, I think is better because of the exploration of the world and all the different things you can do. Like it's very fun, and with that finale at the end and everything you can do afterwards, I think it's really good. And there's less things that frustrate me in Mario Odyssey compared to Mario Galaxy. So what I'm getting at with Mario Galaxy is that while there's a lot of things I love about it, like I love the music, I love the space at the setting, you know, and I love a lot of the gravity mechanics. Like there's some really cool things that are very unique. Like playing Galaxy is an incredible experience because when you play Galaxy, it's like it kind of changes how you think in order to sort of understand like the gravity mechanics, which is an amazing thing. And I think that's a point for Galaxy's favor as well. But also some things that bother me, for example, are like the camera. Like the camera is limited in Galaxy. You can't turn it all the way around. You can't always center your camera. And I think that is kind of a hit for Galaxy. That's something that Odyssey has over it for sure. You can fully sort of explore and see every part of the world in Odyssey while you can't in Galaxy.
I'm glad that you brought up the camera because that is an incredibly good point. And I think that when we talk about how much more modern Odyssey feels from like, you know, like a standard Mario control perspective, 100% it's that. You know, they weren't dealing with 2 analog sticks on Mario Galaxy. That's not at all how you were controlling that game, right? So you didn't have free floating camera controls. They were Nintendo designed the game so that the game was more in control of the camera than the player.
You mean Galaxy? Like Galaxy had the lack of 2 sticks.
Yeah, did I confuse the titles? Maybe I confused
maybe,
the titles.
Or maybe
if
I just
I did,
got
that's
confused.
my fault.
I don't know.
Who knows? There's something about constantly going between Galaxy and Odyssey that makes your brain just totally freak out. But what I definitely meant was Galaxy. On the Wii, that one was restricted by, you didn't have dual analog. That's not how you controlled that game. You were using a Wii Remote and nunchuck. So the game was in control of the camera, not the player. Odyssey, a more modern game, in the dual analog era, you know, even for Nintendo, you control that game with a normal, regular camera, which adds to the open world and it adds to the modern feel. So without question, that is way, way, way better in Odyssey than it is in Galaxy. So I'm really glad you brought up that point, because as much as I like the control in Galaxy, that really is one of the things that takes it back. And I think that, you know, this conversation and this aspect of comparison, I think just has to do with, if you, the royal you, the random you who's listening to this, or you or me or whoever, if you look at a game and appreciate it based on its timelessness, or if you're able to base your opinion and your preferences on your experiences as they happened. And everyone has a unique approach to that. There's no right or wrong way. My way, though, as a very nostalgic guy, is a lot of times when I think of the games or the video game consoles or the movies or whatever that I like and I rank a certain way, a lot of times it's because I was old enough to know how it felt when it happened in its own zeitgeist period. And when I compare that to something else, that's when I make up my mind. Like, the Nintendo 64 is far from being Nintendo's best console, objectively. It is not a timeless console, but it is my favorite because I was 16 and what that thing did, we had never seen before. And my brain wasn't prepared for how dope it was at the time. So even though plenty of consoles after the 64 are better, now, I don't care. My favorite is because of my nostalgia. And so with Galaxy, I do think Galaxy, to its credit, is pretty timeless and very playable today. But as you and I have said, it's not as modern as Odyssey. Odyssey feels way more modern and controls better in a lot of ways outside of the Cappy thing, just for me personally. So I think that when I compare those two, it's like there's so many things Odyssey does do better from a more timeless perspective than Galaxy, but I have to still find Galaxy to be the better game because of my nostalgia for it. And it also cannot be understated, especially for anyone listening who is either too young to have played it when it came out, or maybe you were so young that you don't remember. But when Galaxy came out, that was also something, that was an experience that no one had ever seen. And it really took the gaming world by storm because of the way, not only did it look incredibly beautiful on a standard definition console when HD was new to the industry from the other two guys, but the controls of the Wii Remote and the nunchuck and doing that motion stuff that we laugh at now was fresh and new and exciting. And that concept of all of the gravity stuff and the planet hopping and the gravity jumping and, you know, doing a long jump that spins you all the way around a thing, and the weird controls of the Stingray races and everything that game did was just, everyone's mind was blown. And so nowadays, it doesn't have that same impact if your first time playing it would be on like Mario 3D All-Stars, for example. It's not as revolutionary. But I was, 27? Okay, I was a pretty old guy even when that game came out. As a 27-year-old, I was like, I've never seen a video game do what this game does. And so when I compare the two, I, just like anyone, I draw on my experiences and my memories. And so it's a combination of the game is objectively great, and my memory of it when it released in 2007 gives it a slight edge. And to which brings us, I think, kind of back to maybe, you know, the thing that really started this conversation. Like, why do I think that Odyssey is overrated? I do want to double down on that real quick, because it's really important that I reaffirm, and I know you know this, but I want to restate that I still think Odyssey is a really, really good game. It's in my top 10 Switch games. Well, it might not be in my top 10 Switch games, actually. I'd have to really think about that, because there's a lot of great Switch games. top 15 for sure, and it's definitely in my top 10 Mario games. And there's like 70 Mario games, okay? So like, that tweet that I put out that you saw was me letting everyone know, hey, overrated doesn't mean bad. I think Mario Odyssey is an 8 out of 10. I think that's a really good score for any video game, and it's on my top 10. I'd probably put it at my 7th or 8th favorite Mario game. It's a really good game, but I find it overrated because there are a lot of people, you know, the definition of overrated is most people herald it as the second coming of Mario games, and like you said, Metacritic has it rated higher than Breath of the Wild, which to me is criminal, but that is what it is.
Breath of the Wild should be rated higher.
I agree. Breath of the Wild to me is like a 98.
What I'm saying is maybe Mario Odyssey isn't rated too high on Metacritic. Maybe Breath of the Wild should have been even higher on Metacritic. And they're both ridiculously high, just for the record. Like, they're some of the highest rated games of all time. So, you know.
But I think Breath of the Wild feels more, and this is, you know, everyone's taste is different. So I'm not saying it's fact. I'm just saying my opinion is I think Breath of the Wild deserves its high rating. Mario Odyssey, if I could pick a Metacritic rating that makes sense, like if we would say 97 for Breath of the Wild, I would be comfortable, even though I'd give it an 8 out of 10, I would say a Metacritic of 90 for Mario Odyssey feels appropriate compared to Breath of the Wild's 97. Does that kind of barometer make any sense the way
I understand where you're coming from, and I actually appreciate that you said that, because I don't think Mario Odyssey is an 8 out of 10 game. I think it's much higher than that. Not to say that an 8 out of 10 game is bad. An 8 out of 10 is pretty good. I still think that Mario Odyssey is one of the best games made, period. I think it is still a substantial, incredible masterpiece. But Mario Galaxy is also a substantial, incredible masterpiece for its time as well. So in my eyes, we're comparing two mega giants of success and just incredible game design. So, you know, from my point of view, like, if 90 on Metacritic is actually really good, because, you know, you have to keep in mind, on Metacritic, it's bringing in all of, like, critic reviews, right? So there's going to be that one guy that's going to be like, oh, this is a stupid game, I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. Why? Because I lost. You know, like, that happens. Like, there are those outliers that bring down the review way down. It's not actually appropriately representative of what most people think. So when you have things like that, a 90 is actually really good. It speaks very well of the game. That means the game for most people is above a 9 out of 10, which is pretty darn awesome. So, you know, I think that's not bad.
And what's funny is, and what's funny is, I'm in a weird place with Mario Odyssey, because it's like, I obviously don't think it's that worthy of those kinds of really high scores. Like, you know, if my personal is an 8 out of 10, it's like, okay, I think it's an 8 out of 10. It's a really good game. But I also am like, I'm not oblivious to what people see in it that makes them give it like a 9.5 out of 10. The 10s out of 10s is a little weird to me. I don't know if I see Odyssey as I don't even know if I can look outside my own self and see it as a 10 out of 10. But I can understand someone saying Mario Odyssey is great. It's a 9.5 out of 10. I don't agree with the 9.5, but I understand video games enough. I've played enough. I've lived with Mario since I was a 4-year-old in 1984. Okay, so I know Mario. I can look outside my own personal opinion and understand the logic of where someone's coming from. It's an incredibly well-designed game by most respects. But I think that, and trying not to turn this into a Odyssey versus Breath of the Wild thing, I just feel like, you know, you brought that up at the beginning, and it's such a worthy comparison just as much as comparing it to Galaxy, because they're contemporaries, they're on the same console, they released in the same year, they represent, you know, arguably
for the record,
for their
this
respective
series
franchises.
could have a comparison just like that in the future. It's just about comparing games that have some sort of semblance of similarity.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's fair to say the vast majority of people, I think there's 3 Mario games your average person would say is the best Mario game. It's either Mario Galaxy, it's Mario Odyssey, I will concede, I know people love it, and that's fine. Some people will say it's the best Mario game, or it's probably Super Mario World. I think those are the 3 games that if you were to ask any 100 people, 97 of those answers are going to be one of those 3 games. I think there's another one that
needs to be in there, and that's Mario 64.
Well, Mario 3.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? You're right. Well, here's the thing. For me, yes, because that's probably my second favorite Mario game. But I don't know. do you think that one is long enough in the tooth at this point that enough people would not throw it in there? I mean, maybe
I
you're
think
right.
Mario 64 is
What do
kind of
you
like
think?
Ocarina of Time, right? Like it's like the first 3D version of its series, and I think it did a really good job of it. Like Mario 64 is a very important game for history because it did pioneer 3D gaming, not just 3D platforming, but 3D gaming. You know, the ideas Nintendo had there with camera control, and just how you sort of move around in a 3D environment. Like they did a lot of things there that were big strides in that type of gameplay. So it's important for history, and I think that kind of supports it a lot for a lot of people. And I think it was also the first 3D Mario for a lot of people, so it does kind of hold that nostalgia. And, you know, even though it may not have aged as gracefully as pretty much any other 3D Mario game, it still has aged more gracefully than
It's
other
still pretty
N64
playable.
games, right? Like it's
true.
compared to other N64 games, it still does a pretty good job. So I actually feel like it holds up relatively well. Now, do I think it is the best Mario game? No. I think Galaxy and Odyssey trump it. But it's still a very good game, and I think a lot of people probably keep it in that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's just a matter of, do you, Andres Restart, think that Odyssey is overrated?
Well, I think that it shouldn't be higher than Breath of the Wild
It's a hard question.
on Metacritic.
Yeah.
But like, to my point earlier, does that mean that Mario Odyssey should be rated more low, or should Breath of the Wild go up a point or two? You know, so that's hard to say for me, right? But in terms of what game is better, Mario Galaxy or Mario Odyssey, it's also tough, right? And I did say at the beginning that I wasn't gonna like necessarily come to a conclusion, and I think my answer is nuanced. So part of my hesitance in picking Galaxy over Odyssey is that I don't want to downplay all the great things in Odyssey, because I think Odyssey is the right direction for Mario. Like, I think that they need to continue in that direction. Like, if they want to find the next best Mario game, they need to go in that direction. If they make if they just make a Galaxy 3, it's not going to be the next best Mario game, in my opinion. But on that point, there's a lot of things they did right in Galaxy that I think they need to take into account with the next Mario game. I think from a musical perspective, I think Galaxy has it over Odyssey. I think from a boss design perspective, Galaxy has it over Odyssey. And I think from a mechanics perspective overall, it does something that feels more different. And I think that holds value as well. And I also think it is a more replayable game. So all those things are in favor of Galaxy. Now, Odyssey, I think it has a better finale, and I think finale is incredibly important to a game. How you end, super important. I think that the freedom of movement and how you interact with the environment, super important, and Odyssey has that over Galaxy. And I think just having these large, beautiful worlds to explore with all these cool characters is pretty awesome. But that's also not to take away from Galaxy, though, because even though Galaxy may have smaller worlds, it's not all entirely linear. There are smaller sort of orbital areas to explore. There are smaller planets that there is exploration to be had there.
Definitely.
So it's not like there isn't any level of exploration in Mario Odyssey. There is. It's just not as good as Mario Odyssey, because Mario Odyssey goes entirely in that direction. So, you know, it's a tough call for me. It really is. There are things on both ends that I think are special, and I think the Ultimate Mario game kind of takes a lot of what I've argued is great in both and has a perfect marriage of it. I think that they're both incredible, but like, you know, if I have to like give an answer, oh man.
Well, you don't really have to. In fact, you could even make a follow-up video where you make your decision and discuss it if you wanted to farm this for future content. Or you can make a call. It's up to you. I'm curious.
Give me your opinion. Maybe I'll change my mind.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, you basically know my opinion.
Yeah.
I think Galaxy's the better game for a variety of reasons. But I also, to go back to some things, there are things that Odyssey does better than Galaxy, and there are things that Galaxy does better than Odyssey. I think that there are less things that Odyssey does better compared to the things that Galaxy does better. But to agree with what you're saying, here's the thing. I still think that the direction, the attempt, as we said earlier, of Mario Odyssey is the right direction, and I want to see more of it. In fact, I would be over the moon, no pun intended, if an Odyssey 2 was announced that was just the framework of Odyssey, but we've improved upon it and we've refined it and we've made it more efficient and bigger and whatever. I would be absolutely thrilled for an Odyssey Part 2. I really would. Because I feel like Odyssey was that attempt that got, for me, really far there, but not all the way there. And I think that, the more linear level design of Galaxy just kind of created a more efficient experience, which to me made it more fun. But I think that if they take the efficiency and the cleanliness of the overall experience of Galaxy and apply it to the Odyssey framework of the open worlds and the kingdoms, and then they make an improved, better mishmash for Odyssey 2 with more kingdoms to play, I mean, bring it on. I am amped as hell for them to make an Odyssey 2 and kind of just improve it in all those ways. So I think it's the right, as much as I'm like, yeah, it's overrated, and I don't give it a 10 out of 10, I give it an 8 out of 10.
I want to focus on that.
I am all in on the concept.
Before we close out. Because you have called it an 8 out of 10, and you have mentioned that you have an issue with the Cappy controls. Is that why it's not closer to a 10 out of 10 for you?
I think I can probably distill it a little bit better now that we've been talking for a while. Before I get to the Cappy, what I will say is I think that after I went through every kingdom that exists and I cleaned out most of the moons that you can just get, right? And so I'm down to like the last, 5 to 10 or whatever in each. I don't know the numbers. Yeah. It's been a while, but I'm down to the last, probably 10% of moons in every single kingdom. At this point, when I go back and revisit, because again, it was, I go back, I revisit, I get bored, and I turn it off. I think I'm at the point where I don't really want to do, the kingdoms are great for the surface level, and I love exploring them, but they aren't designed for, in my opinion, super fun, deep discovery, like a Skyrim or a Breath of the Wild open world is, right? That's not what Odyssey does. And so I find myself, I'm like, I'm not interested in finding the really obscure moons that I'm down to in every single one of the kingdoms. So I get bored in that respect, and so I turn it off. And then, yes, the other is, man, there's a lot about the Cappy thing I love. I love so much about it. But I don't think they quite nailed it. I would say they maybe got 85% of the way on that idea for me, okay? And so maybe that's another thing. Whereas again, I think they made it 100% of the way with the gravity stuff in Galaxy. I think they made it about 80 to 85% of the way on the Cappy thing. And again, I am only talking me. I don't share my opinions trying to convince people to agree with me. That's not what I'm doing. But that's my takeaway. That's my assessment. So does that make sense?
It does make sense.
What I'm getting at there?
And to kind of, this is actually in somewhat a support of Odyssey and against Galaxy. I really also enjoyed the Cappy mechanics, right? Like, so one, in terms of Cappy's kind of also like the replacement for the spin attack in Galaxy, right? Because it gives you that extra bit of movement in the air. You can jump on it, you can use it as a platform, and you also can use it to bonk things or capture an enemy. So it gives you a lot of different options in terms of platforming. But then what I'm assuming you're mostly focusing on when it comes to the Cappy mechanics, you mean just like transforming or possessing different other characters, and that offers a whole slew of other unique gameplay possibilities. And I think that is pretty cool. It's cool, it's exciting.
It is cool.
But is it like mind-blowing? I don't know if I would call it mind-blowing, right? Like, it doesn't completely change my perspective on reality. But Galaxy kind of does with its gravity mechanics. The first time I played that was the first time, I don't think anyone had really done anything quite like that before. And it's crazy. And if you haven't played Galaxy, I'll just like briefly kind of describe it. You have this series of round worlds, and they can be small, they could be big. And it's just basically this spherical movement, and there's a gravity to them. You can do a long jump, and you can actually apply the gravity physics to extend your jump. Sometimes you can jump in a way where you can break out of the gravitational pull, or you can simply use that gravitational pull to swing entirely around the planet. And in some cases, it's not a planet, it's just a plane that has gravity on one side and a deferring gravity on the other. And
oh, those physics were like nothing anyone had seen at the time.
it was so
man.
different.
Right?
It was so different.
So cool.
But this is where I'm providing sort of a counter argument, though. It was a lot of crazy stuff, but I also think there were moments where it was a little off-putting. It was a little disorienting at times.
Yeah, I actually have a really good friend and an ex-roommate of mine, and she said she couldn't play the Galaxy games because they made her sick. This is like 10 years ago too.
Yeah.
So I think you're right.
So, you know, I think that should also be considered, right? Like, while it may have been an even more unique and different idea than the Cappy mechanics, because ultimately the Cappy mechanics is basically just a really polished embellishment of what's been done in previous 3D platforming games. For example, the Banjo-Kazooie games, you could transform into different things and do different stuff in that way. It's not the first time it's been done in a platforming game.
Yeah, just different controls based on the character.
It was just a very fun, well done thing. Like Mario Odyssey, I wouldn't say is revolutionary. It just does a really good job of a lot of things. I think it does a better job than pretty much any platformer for that type of game. For like open sandbox games, I think it's probably the most polished like open sandbox platforming game ever. But it isn't like revolutionary, right? It didn't incorporate it, like bring in a whole bunch of new mechanics we've never seen before. Galaxy did. I think that's something that helps it stand apart, but also, you know, it's not all roses and peaches and daisies and all sorts of nice things, because it's not perfect. It's still really good.
I think it's also fair to say that a game doesn't necessarily have to be revolutionary to be great or even better than another game. I do think, you know, you and I are on the same page that Galaxy was more revolutionary, whereas Odyssey actually wasn't revolutionary. It was really just like straightforward, very well executed Mario with one unique twist that was certainly cool. And so a game doesn't have to be better than a prior game to be seen as a great game. A game doesn't have to be revolutionary to be as good or better than any other game. But I do think it's worth noting that maybe one of the things I'm kind of realizing as I'm re-remembering, as you're describing it, I'm re-remembering playing Odyssey and throwing Cappy on things and controlling stuff. Maybe this is one of the things that also detracted from the experience for me a little bit, is that I think I don't love constantly not being Mario. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't necessarily need to always, and it's not that it's bad. Again, I like the game, and I do still like using Cappy on things. I want to keep reminding folks of that as I talk about it. But if I could pick my ideal Mario game, I'm always Mario in the game.
I agree with that, actually.
And so Odyssey, yeah, do you know what I'm saying?
For example,
so it's not that Cappy isn't cool.
Yoshi is in Mario Odyssey, but you don't ride Yoshi. Mm-hmm. You possess Yoshi.
Yeah.
No, I gotta ride my Yoshi. So
yeah,
you know.
Hashtag
now,
Yoshi ride.
That said, there are some incredible things. Like I love the yellow dinosaur that you can glide around with. I mean, there's so many cool things you can possess, right? Like the stretchy caterpillars, for example.
Those little worm.
Yeah,
the caterpillars. I don't know the name. Those things where you stretch and you move your body across ledges. Awesome. Yeah. So cool. Like trust me. I'm not dogging Odyssey. There are tons of moments in that game that I'm like, whoa, this is amazing.
Or the bullet bills.
And that's a great example.
Possessing a bullet bill.
Definitely, the bullet bills are great.
And we cannot
definitely
end this topic without bringing up possessing a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like, that's just...
See, I was disappointed by that one, though.
Maybe that's why it's an out of 10 for you.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. It wasn't bad. It's just that it's such a... Here's the thing. The idea is awesome, and I was stoked when I saw it in the trailer. But once I did it in the game, I was like, you're kind of just a big fumbly, bumbly, you know? And I mean, what more could you do with it, to be fair? So maybe I shouldn't really hold that against them. Like, what are you going to do? You're just a big...
You could argue it's a bit of a
novelty. You know what I
liked
liked more than the T-Rex? It is. Here's what I think was better than the T-Rex, is the chain chomps.
Oh, yeah.
The big chain chomps, where you could like wind up... you would like pull back on your chain and then you would shoot it forward or whatever and
Very
break
cool.
Parts.
Yeah.
That was really a great use.
But you know what's interesting about a lot of these things, they're all really cool, but a lot of these things could have been done by Mario riding them as opposed to possessing them. And it's a very simple difference, right? Like, Mario could, in theory, ride all of these characters or pal up with them as opposed to possessing them. And there wouldn't be that much of a difference in terms of gameplay. And it would be the same effect, and you probably would have appreciated it more because it goes to your idea of Mario, playing as Mario mostly. And I kind of feel you on that. And I'll even say, like, for example, when you get to ride around on this little Sphinx things, that's super cool. And you're not possessing them, I don't think. I think you're riding them. Like
this. Oh, it's the little cat. Yeah. Like that you run
I call
around
them the Sphinx.
Yeah,
but
you're right. You ride it.
Yeah,
you're correct.
Blind statue things.
Yeah. And that's cool. Yeah, that feel you're like, I'm Mario. It's like driving a vehicle or like whatever, It's like, or like Link using the glider in Breath of the Wild. Like, yeah, you're controlling a flying thing, but you're still Link.
Yeah. Another good example
like
that comes to mind. It's not in Odyssey. It's actually in Bowser's Fury when you ride Plessy. That's awesome. It's super fun, and it's like a variation to the gameplay. But you're riding another character. You're still Mario. So I kind of think that they should stick with that, where it's Mario, but if you want to have a variation in gameplay, there's another way you do it as opposed to possession.
Yeah, it's a placebo effect, I think it's fair to call, where it's like essentially the gameplay is the same in both versions, but there's something, I think what you're saying is mentally, you're still Mario, and so it feels more comfortable to be doing. And I think you're right. I would probably feel that same thing. Not trying to dog Odyssey, because again, there are tons of things it does that I thought was great. But I think that it's a really good point. And it builds off the point I was saying is I just realized, when thinking back, I'm like, man, the game, the mechanic is possessing things with Cappy. So of course you're going to constantly do it, but it means you're constantly just not Mario. And so maybe a lot of people love that, and I don't want to take it away from someone who's like, that's what I loved about it. That's cool. It's a really good game. But I think that if I compare it to my other favorite Mario games, which is Galaxy and 64 and Super Mario World, it's like, well, I'd rather just always be Mario, and do other things that
there
are
aren't really
to the
power-ups in Odyssey now that I think about it. Yeah, like they did away with power-ups.
Are there not? I think you're right.
And I think that the possessions are basically the replacement for that.
Yeah.
And
they still work. It's not that I may be talking about something that I didn't super fall in love with, but like it does still work. It made a really good game, and it is a cool mechanic, and there is a lot of great things to do with it. But it does also come with taking away some other elements of Mario at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's just a lot to think about.
And there's something else I want to add, and that's that. While we're talking about how Galaxy was a more unique experience, and perhaps it did some crazy things. Maybe revolutionary is not even the right word for that, because it's not like gravity mechanics became a mainstay in the industry afterwards, right? It was just like a really cool set of mechanics that. It was a really cool experience. Like, it was a really cool, unique experience that did some very special things. But at the same time, you could argue that Odyssey, in a lot of ways, is also really important because it's sort of, you could argue, ushered a little bit of a renaissance of 3D platforming. It proved that 3D platforming in a more open style can be done, and be done really well in the modern age. Because there has been sort of like a lack of 3D platformers throughout most of the 2000s. So I think there's value in that. Not to mention, Mario Odyssey is also the best-selling 3D Mario. So it did something right.
That's the Switch effect. Yeah, it definitely did, yeah. I think it definitely released at a great time, and I don't want to take away from people who just, they love the game and they say it's a 10 out of 10 or it's my favorite Mario game. Like, I totally believe people when they say that. But I do think that something we're all guilty of, just as like a human race, is that recency bias and that newness bias when something is the newest and the freshest. And if we even focus that more on specifically Nintendo as a game company and the Switch as their current device, as you and I were talking before this conversation, the popularity and the strength of Nintendo's brand and the Switch as a piece of hardware, I think might also be aiding into that, especially for maybe some younger folks out there, people who are like in their like mid to late teens or something, who don't have the same kind of long-term experience that you and I do and some others do. So your comparison window is so much more small that sometimes the newest game of the newest platform you play in whatever franchise is just the best because it's the newest and it's the most modern. And we all succumb to that. So, you know, I'm not trying to make that claim necessarily for anyone because, again, I'm not trying to say I don't believe people when they say maybe Odyssey is their favorite or they think it's a 10 out of 10. I mean, everyone's opinion is valid in their own. But I wonder if that colors it a little bit. I've done that in the past, you know, and I've tried to shake myself of that and really look at things for what they are. So
I understand your point about recency bias, like that. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, everyone's biased, and there's no way to eliminate all bias. We can try, and try to be objective, but ultimately, we're talking about our opinions on a video game, which is inherently subjective, right, and also inherently biased.
Absolutely.
So yes. You know, yeah. There probably is some recency bias there, but also,
But the game is still good too, though. I mean, I don't want that to sound like, you know, I'm the hater and I'm trying to take away from what Odyssey does well, because it is a really good game, you know. So it's that nuance of that concept. Is it recency bias, or is it that the game actually is that good? Like Breath of the Wild to me actually is that good, even though it's just as new as Mario Odyssey, right? So. You just got to pick between the two sometimes. And
something that should be brought up is technically we do have 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and I don't see many people making the argument that Bowser's Fury is better than Mario Odyssey. You know, now granted, it's not a full feature game either, but you know, I mean, I feel like that might mess with the recency bias thing a little bit. And Odyssey has been almost half a decade at this point. It hasn't been a short time. So, and then Mario Galaxy did just get a remaster. It's just the most recent main
Mario Galaxy did. Yeah, that's true.
Now, I would argue that the remaster hurts it a little bit because the pointer controls just aren't as intuitive. And they don't feel as natural with the motion controls on the Pro Controller, for example. It's a little off. I mean, it's fine. It's totally playable and enjoyable, but I think playing it on the Wii back in the day as it was intended, you'll get a different experience out of it.
Yeah. And I even think that's the same with like Skyward Sword, which I've actually been playing the last couple of days as well. And it's amazing. It totally works and it's great, but it's like, oh yeah, it's still a little bit different.
It is, but I also think it benefits from having that camera control. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't add that to Galaxy, which might have, you know.
Well, the camera control, so that's if you play with the Pro Controller. I played Skyward Sword, even HD, I played it with the Joy-Cons.
Okay.
I think you still... So that was just me, though. That was just me.
You can still use an analog stick to to move around the camera.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. You
might not need to, because it was designed without needing it. But...
No, but you do, and honestly, I think I have been. Yeah,
it's so like it's so natural though that you probably don't even like think about it.
Honestly, I think you nailed it. I think that's exactly what it is. And on the Wii, for anyone who didn't play Skyward Sword on the Wii, because there was no analog stick, you could only recenter the camera. That's the only way you moved it around. You know, I think it was the Z button on the nunchuck, right? And you would, whenever you turned, you'd have to press it to recenter the camera behind Link, and that's the only way you moved the camera. And it worked, but it was awkward. And they did change that because of the Switch controls. That's a great game. I went through Wind Waker in 11 days, and then I was like, you know, I'm at the very end of my Skyward Sword HD playthrough. I've beaten it on the Wii like 5 times. I was like, you know, I finished Wind Waker. It's my favorite game. I'm just going to go finish Skyward Sword. And so I've been doing that for the last couple days.
Cool. So to actually conclude things, I'll say that, and some people may feel like this is a cop-out. I'm going to say I'm 50-50 on the map. There are things about Galaxy that are special that it has over Mario Odyssey. I think the boss designs are better. I think the music is better. I think the game gives you a better sense of epicness, which I think is important. Like, it makes the adventure feel more exhilarating. But at the same time, not being able to see things as freely as you can in Mario Odyssey, not being able to interact with the environment and explore as much as you can in Mario Odyssey, and the flexibility of movement you have in Mario Odyssey, I think is something that it has over Mario Galaxy. And for that reason, I can't just like straight up say one is better than the other. I think the gravity mechanics are really cool in Galaxy. They're kind of mind-blowing. The first time I did it, I thought they were mind-blowing, but revisiting it, they're a little disorienting. And then for Odyssey, I think it's just a really well-polished effort, but it's also because of the structure of the game. Once you go through it one time, it's hard to get through it a second time. It's a little bit harder than Mario Galaxy. So there are just things about both games that I really, really like. I like most things about both games, but there are little issues with both that I think can be remedied if they were to have a more proper marriage of both concepts in a future game. So I'm just going to say 50-50. It might be like 55-45, but next week my opinion might switch in the other direction. So I'm just going to say 50-50.
Yep. Okay. That's totally valid. It all makes sense to me. When you're picking between two great games, it's like, usually there's no wrong answer, even if one person prefers one or the other. So I get that, and I like to hear that you still carry so much weight for Galaxy, just because as a personal fan, it is my favorite, so I just love to hear that. I think the main point I want to just leave everyone with and leave the conversation with is, Galaxy obviously is my favorite Mario game of all time, and it's in my top 10 favorite video games of all time for all the reasons I kind of talked about and gushed about here. But I don't want to leave this without still reminding everyone that at the end of the day, thinking Odyssey is maybe a little overrated, or thinking that it's not as good as a lot of people say, is definitely not the same as thinking that it's actively a bad game. I've never said that. I ranked it on my top 10 Mario games of all time a couple of years ago, and I stand by that, somewhere in the spaces of like 7 or 8 or so on that list. And there's a ton of things. It's one of those games where like there are things it doesn't do as well as I wanted, and that doesn't line up to the reviews I see other people give it to me. But it does way, 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 way more good things than the few things I think it doesn't really nail. And I love the open world design. I like the idea of the kingdoms. The Cappy mechanic, it maybe didn't land in every use, but overall was a really cool, fun, unique idea that felt very Mario and very Nintendo creative. And I also think it is the perfect template, despite Galaxy being much better in my eyes. I think Odyssey laid the perfect template for the next game and for the future of the franchise. So I'm still on board with the foundation that Odyssey laid. I enjoyed the game, and in fact, because we spent an hour talking about it, there's a great chance I'm going to turn it on tonight. I mean, really. I'm serious. Like, why wouldn't I just let me go mess around with it? Yeah, that's a lofty goal. I mean, again, I think I'm at around 6:30 or something, so I still have a ways to go. But I haven't cleared out any kingdom. I don't have a single kingdom that I've gotten 100% on. So I'll probably just spend a couple of days just messing. That's how I usually revisit games, is I'm like, for a couple of days, I'm hooked on this one game. Because I'm waiting for like Fire Emblem Warriors and stuff and Monster Hunter break. So until then, it's like I'm just playing old games, So yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone, I don't hate Odyssey. It's a good game. I own it. I'm never going to get rid of it.
If you go to Rob's channel and you dislike one of his videos because he doesn't think Mario Odyssey is the greatest thing ever, what's wrong with you? But
what's wrong? Like a Reggie, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. But you should definitely go to his channel, though. It's linked in the description below. And you should check out his videos because he makes really awesome videos as well. Mostly about Nintendo, but there's some other cool little things he talks about occasionally as well. So definitely go check that out, guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the plug.
And any other final thoughts?
No, just that this was fun. Every time we get together and every time my internet allows it, we have a great chat and a really good time. So I just appreciate you bringing the idea up to me and having me on your channel and BSing with me about Mario for it. This was a blast. I mean, this was so much fun.
It's always funny, like, whenever we have conversations, we always go way longer than anticipated. We had an hour-long discussion before actually doing this recording that was entirely unplanned. I do not know if it will ever hit the public, but we'll see. Anyways, guys.
Maybe.
What were you going to say, Rob?
I was just going to say, I hope it does make it out there, but I'll let you decide. It's your stuff.
See.
Anyway.
Maybe if people in the comments demand it. We'll see. But anyways, guys, we'll see you really soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.